Hello everyone. Today on the last day of Ramzan, I will sing a song composed by Rabindranath Tagore at the age of 45. Today I have a bit of a cold and my voice is not situated on my usual scale, but I must seize the day before it slips away. I have invited my friend Muhammad Faruque to comment on this song, and his reflections will appear after the song. Professor Farouk is based at the University of Cincinnati, and he works extensively on different aspects of Sufi theology. আমি বহু বাসনায় প্রাণপণে চাই, বঞ্চিত করে বাঁচালে মোরে। এ কৃপা কঠোর সঞ্চিত মোর জীবন ভরে। বহু বাসনায় প্রাণপণে চাই, বঞ্চিত করে বাঁচালে মোরে। এই কৃপা কঠোর সঞ্চিত মোর জীবন ভরে। না চাহিতে মোরে যা করেছ দান, আকাশ আলোক তনু মন প্রাণ। না চাহিতে মোরে যা করেছ দান, আকাশ আলোক তনু মন প্রাণ। দিনে দিনে তুমি নিতেছ আমায় সে মহাদানেরই যোগ্য করে। অতি ছাড়ো সংকট হতে বাঁচায়ে মোরে। বহু বাসনায় প্রাণপণে চাই, বঞ্চিত করে বাঁচালে মোরে। আমি কখনো বা ভুলি, কখনো বা চলি তোমার পথের লক্ষ্য ধরে। তুমি নিষ্ঠুর সম্মুখ হতে যাও যে সরে। এ যে তব দয়া জানি জানি হায়, নিতে চাও বলে ফিরাও আমায়। এ যে তব দয়া জানি জানি হায়, নিতে চাও বলে ফিরাও আমায়। পূর্ণ করিয়া লবে জীবন তব মিলনেরই যোগ্য করে। আধাই ছাড়ো সংকট হতে বাঁচায়ে মোরে। বহু বাসনায় প্রাণপণে চাই, বঞ্চিত করে বাঁচালে মোরে।
Greetings of peace. I would like to begin by thanking Dr. Barua for giving me this opportunity to share some humble thoughts on this poem by Rabindranath Tagore and its relation to Quran and Sufism. But before I begin, I thought I'd say something about what I normally do as an academic. So I'm primarily a philosopher in the ancient Greek sense of the term, that is a lover of wisdom. And philosophy, as people often think, it deals with analysis, logic, mathematics, science, and so on. And that's true, but what is perhaps forgotten in the modern time, in the modern age, is that there's a deep relationship between philosophy and poetry. And they're actually not opposed to each other. So from time to time, I do personally enjoy reading poetry in multiple languages, especially in Persian, Arabic, but also in Urdu and Bengali, and sometimes even in French or German. And I'm very much fond of Sufi poetry. And oftentimes I think about the relationship between philosophy and poetry, and I feel like they really meet when it comes to their source and inspiration. So philosophy and poetry at the deepest level, especially when it comes to mystical and devotional poetry, they're kind of complementary. Now, Tagore has a deep relationship with Sufism, and this is perhaps people often try to capture this through the influence of Lalon and also Kabir on his poetry, and that's true. But there's a deep relationship between Tagore's poetry and Hafiz, the Persian poet Hafiz, because Debendranath Tagore knew Persian and he'd recite poetry every day. And Tagore himself really loved Hafiz. When he visited Iran, he went to Hafiz's mausoleum in Shiraz and really showed great devotion. This is well documented. So what I'm about to say now has to be understood in that context. Actually, when I personally read Tagore, I'm always mesmerized by this connection between his poetry and Hafiz. And sometimes it really feels like Sufi, especially Hafizian poetry in Bengali. So the poem that we'll be talking about is from Gitanjali, Tagore's famous poetry for which he won the Nobel Prize, although the version translated into English contains poems from other books of poetry. Anyway, I want to focus on the very first verse. So it says in Bengali, "Ami bohu bashanai pran pone chai, bonchito kore bachale more, e kripa kothur sanchito mor jibon bhore, na chahite more ja korecho dan, akash olok tonu monu pran, dine dine tumi nitecho amai, she mahadaneri juggo kore, oti ichhar sankot hote bachaye more." Anyway, it goes on. So I thought a good way to put this in conversation with Sufism and also in light of a verse of the Quran would be to actually recite the famous verse in the Quran about Ramadan. And this might sort of surprise some people because we're really at the very end of Ramadan. Today is the kind of the very last day of Ramadan. And but if we reflect deeply on the teachings of fasting, look at the Quran and the prophetic tradition and the life of the Prophet, we realize that this is meant to be a lifelong practice of moderation, of conquering one's desires, negative desires and thoughts and emotions. So the verse in the Quran about fasting is very well known. In Arabic, it says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyamu kama kutiba alal ladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed to you just as it has been prescribed to former people, so that you maintain taqwa, which is variously translated, comes from the Arabic word waw, of and ya, basically means to safeguard, to guard. But taqwa means having some kind of awareness of God. It's kind of being mindful of God, being mindful of one's disobedience, but at a deeper level, being conscious of the deep relationship with the divine. But when it comes to talking about how to attain this state of God consciousness or God awareness, Sufis talk about it at length, and I think they bring out some of the more salient aspects of fasting. So if we ask the question, what is the essence of fasting? According to Sufi teachings, it's about abstention, self-restraint, not just of food and sexual desires or other kind of bodily desires, but also abstention or from negative thoughts and emotions and especially desires. So and fasting is deeply connected to hunger. when we fast for 13 and 14 hours for a prolonged period for about 30 days, it's about hunger. So Sufis talk a great deal about the essence of hunger. What does it teach us? So at a physical level, hunger is it's about emptying of the stomach. But the question should be that should be asked is, what does it do? As we feel hungry, it should remind us of well, it has there's many different ways we can reflect on its teachings. We can think about people who are hungry, of course, but at a more deeper and a spiritual level, it should remind us of our deep connection with God. And the question may be asked, how? So we as human beings, we as finite mortal beings feel hungry, and we feel, and this is a basic need. But when you think about God, one of the things that kind of differentiates God from human beings is that God is self-sufficient, Ghani in Arabic. He is independent, he is self-sufficient, does not need to eat, he is free from all of these bodily and all kinds of desires. So hunger at the deepest level allows us to actually participate in the divine life, at least even for a few moments. But those who, of course, have gone far on their spiritual journey, they can sustain this, and we see this in the lives of great saints and as even yogis in Hinduism. But when it comes to early Sufism, especially, there are all sorts of stories where people would fast very often. But it's not just the Sufis. If we look at the life of the Prophet, that's why it's actually meaningful to remind ourselves of the kind of deeper teachings of fasting as we are about to end Ramadan. So the Prophet would actually fast throughout the year, but it's also important to remember that the purpose is not kind of asceticism, renunciation, where you deprive your body in a way that's kind of not normal. That might work for some people, maybe some Sufis, but in general, that's not what we learn from the Prophet. So coming back to Tagore's poetry, আমি বহু বাসনায় প্রাণপণে চাই, বঞ্চিত করে বাঁচালে মরে, এই কৃপা কঠোর সঞ্চিত মোর জীবন ভরে. এরপরে it goes on, এ যে তব দয়া জানি জানি হাই, নিতে চাও বলে ফিরাও আমায়, পূর্ণ করিয়া লবে এর জীবন, তব মিলনেরই যোগ্য করে, আদায় ইচ্ছার সংকট হতে বাঁচে মরে. So he's talking about oti ichha, and then adha ichha, bahu vasana, manifold desires, oti ichha, unbridled desires, and then adha ichha, half-baked desires. And so Tagore is saying that, oh, sorry, I don't think I actually translated the first verse. So আপনি বহু বাসনায় প্রাণপণে চাই, বঞ্চিত করে বাঁচালে মোরে, এ কৃপা কঠোর সঞ্চিত মোর জীবন ভরে. Zealously do I pursue my manifold desires. By denying them to me, you have saved me. So this is, in a way, something that people who are fast Muslims can deeply relate it to. So when we feel hungry, we really want to eat, but we know Ramadan, the teaching of the Ramadan tells us we should not be eating. And so it helps us to kind of control our desires. And one of the obstacles on the journey to find God, to have connection with God, is that we're sometimes overcome by our desires, and that takes us in so many different directions. We become forgetful of God. So Tagore is actually saying this is a kind of cruel kindness. God is it's dialogue with God. So he's saying, even though I have all of these desires, you're denying me all of this, but by denying them, ultimately you are leading me to yourself. And even though this is tough, but the end is kind of union with God. And that is precisely the essence of hunger in relation to fasting. It should lead us to the deeper awareness within ourselves, where we can be mindful of God. That's the essence of taqwa. So I would end this by saying this is actually a very ancient teaching. So in Plato's Phaedo, for example, there is this opposition between spirituality and materiality, rather than, I would not say body and soul, because it's not that kind of Cartesian dualism. Rather, as we try to disengage ourselves from these bodily desires through fasting and through hunger, we actually approach our deeper spiritual self. And at the deepest level, there is kind of union with the divine. Thank you.